So let's start at this end. Introduce yourself and what your background is.
Hi, my name is Richard Geldreich. I've worked at Microsoft, Valve, SpaceX. I worked on Starlink. I'm a software engineer, I'm a programmer. I've been doing this since 1985, and I've been analyzing deeply various archives and UFO chronologies and databases for the last approximately 3 years, very deeply.
Okay, Mitch.
Hi, I'm Mitch Randall. My background is radar. I have a degree in physics and a degree in engineering. And what I have done is, inspired by Peter Davenport, worked on his passive radar idea. And I brought that to the Galileo project as a proof of concept principle. And now I've turned it into something called Operation Skywatch, which I'm excited to talk about. What it is, just to give you an idea, is imagine you buy a little box, put it on your roof, or put it on your counter and a little antenna on there, and now we can see radar data of all the objects in the sky across the country.
In real time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Anthony Peake. Thanks, guys. I'm by training a sociologist, but I've been fascinated by extraordinary human experiences for nearly 50 years, maybe more. And I apply my work into near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and the interface between this and neurology, quantum mechanics, and various other scientific areas. And as many of you know, I'm a bit of a peculiar thinker.
Caroline.
Hi, I'm Caroline Cory. I am an alien. Okay, so I can see people waking up. So my background is in consciousness studies and research. I started out at a very young age having direct experiences with beings with telepathy and things like that. And so I researched the subject of consciousness for about 20 years, working with many scientists from different disciplines, demonstrating the effect of consciousness on the physical reality, who we are, what are we doing here, how does it all work, what is reality, and so on and so forth. And I'm a filmmaker, and I hope you've seen my films.
Adam.
Carolyn, you're not supposed to give away the secrets of being an alien.
I think by now everybody knows.
I'm Adam. I'm an independent inventor and technologist. I work in private equity, but in a previous life, I was a scientist doing consciousness research in a laboratory capacity at Princeton's Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, and was also a visiting scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences.
My name is Marc D'Antonio. Some of you may know who I am because you attended Skywatches and SkyTour livestream observatory events with me. I'm an astronomer, and this is what we look like. And we don't always wear suits, right? And I'm also the Mutual UFO Network's chief photo and video analyst. So I see stuff from all over the world. And I'll tell you, it's stuff that can rock your world, and you know that because that's why you're here. But back to Clyde.
Thank you. Give him a big hand. Now, what we do is I'm going to ask a few questions. At least these are some random questions I have in my mind. They'll be able to expand upon them. We're just going to have a good discussion. I'll even leave it open for you guys towards the end of the presentation so you can ask some questions as well, and we'll try and get those addressed. I think one of the first things I want to ask the panel is, we all know the analogy of the blind Indian men in the room with the elephant. And every single one of them touches the elephant in a certain way, and they describe the elephant in a certain way. Is this what we're dealing with when we're dealing with the UFO phenomena? And is this why we're not getting a straight answer from a number of people? I want to go down starting with Richard down, and we'll get their opinions as we go down and we'll do it the other way too. But I just want to know about the elephant and the blind men and whether or not we're dealing with several different ideas and how we're going to try to narrow them down to one.
I That's a wonderful question.
Thank you.
So to me, as a programmer, I want to know where the data is at. I want to know how large the data is. Is the data easy to find, hard to find? So I've been through a lot of the citing repositories, chronologies, databases that have been gathered since at least the 40s, going all the way back to Frank Scully's 14 collection. And the data that I'm seeing indicates a very large, I would call it an extreme signal of some sort of indirect evidence showing that there is absolutely something interacting with us. I'm going to be honest with you, it is overwhelming. I could compile, I estimate 50 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes of PDFs. If I scan documents, if I go through all the archives, I found almost 1 million hits for flying disc or unidentified flying objects or flying saucer with quotes in newspapers.com's database, and they're still coming in every month. They're still scanning local papers. It turns out that Stanton Friedman, a physicist, was right. There is a radar connection. Dr. James McDonald, he was right about 1947. We found corroborative data, many forms of it, and Dr. Hynek was right as well. So that's my opinion. It's an enormous amount of data. You cannot say it doesn't exist. Something's going on.
Gulp. To answer your question specifically, there clearly are a lot of dimensions to the problem, right? It's newspaper reports, talk about a lot of those dimensions. There's physical things. There's, they talk about it as a phenomenon. So there clearly is. But in my opinion, I don't think that's the reason why it hasn't come out. So, which I think was your question. And then just to say, what I'm looking for is a very physical aspect of it.
I think what I was trying to explain, or trying to hopefully tell you was, or trying to converse about, is it seems to me that while we're all craving disclosure, what we have is confirmation. We all have confirmation, am I right? Confirmation?
Right.
Yeah? Okay, so we all have confirmation, but we all have a different idea of what this confirmation is. And would that be the reason why they're so hung up? I mean, we have everybody wanting to control the narrative, right? We have the Pope and the Vatican, they want to control the narrative. We have the scientists that want to control the narrative, and NASA, who, if it doesn't gel with them, they immediately say, well, whatever. And that's the problem I'm seeing, is that we need to, there needs to be at least a summation with regard to what's happening. And so we need minds like you guys to try and figure out what it is. Like I say, the elephant, everybody gets a different opinion. So that's what I mean. I mean, is this why they're not giving us any straight answers about it?
Again, I think the reason why we're not getting straight answers, I mean, there's some reason that we're not getting their data, for example. Mm-hmm. So my angle on it is, okay, if they're not going to give us the data, we're going to take the data. Oh. So that's my angle on it. And also I think that, I think disclosure itself is an interesting thing because, normally in all of our life, we listen to authority to tell us what these answers are. And we're expecting the president or some kind of authority, or maybe it's science, all the scientists, or my textbook to tell me UFOs are real. This phenomena is real, and that's not coming forth. And so what do we do when, when that kind of information isn't coming? It just leaves us with our hands in the air. And, people want to, demand the government is transparent and try to force these things to happen, but they're holding all the cards. So,
you bring up an excellent point. What about culture acceptance? We already know, you and I know, everybody knows, how do we get it weaved into the culture? I mean, they want to put everything else into the culture, everything from LGBTQ to, trans, all this stuff. Why not we put that into the culture as well as something that's accepted, rather than having to sit there and play blind all the time and snicker whenever people talk about UFOs?
I mean, what you're talking about is a segue to exactly why I'm here, which is to announce Operation Skywatch. And the idea is there's citizens out there that are capable of, we can build a box that you can put in your house that would detect UFOs. The problem is, what's the chance a UFO is going to come over my scientific, research institute is low. So what we need to do is have 10,000 of these around the country, 10,000 citizens participating in this. And instead of begging the government to get this kind of data, radar data or video information, we're just going to go out and do it ourselves. So this is and it talks about what you're saying, this acceptance. You know, the scientific community, if you ask them, are UFOs real? They say no, because there's no data.
Which is bullshit.
At the same time, there's so much data that we all know here at this conference. We all know about this data, but it's not the kind of data they want.
They're cherry picking.
And part of the reason is there's no university or whatever that will just stand up as an authority and say, this is real data, UFOs are here. So anyway, I want to just take it into the hands of the citizens.
Fantastic work. Thank you so much. That was a great... And now for your mind to be bent, we have Anthony.
Hello, everybody.
I had a chance to talk with him before. I watched his videos. This guy's amazing. So what do you have to say?
Right, okay. Well, firstly, I'd come in with my sociology hat on. And of course, some of you will know that many years ago, a guy called Thomas Kuhn came up with the idea of the theory of scientific revolutions. And the idea is that within the seeds of every scientific paradigm are the outliers, the anomalies that don't fit in with the present scientific belief system. I wouldn't say it's a belief system, because science obviously is built upon data and solid data, and that's the issue we have here. But the present science is preoccupied with physicality. It's preoccupied with material reductionism. It's the idea you break something down into its component parts, and therefore you can understand how it works, as you do, for instance, with a car engine, where you take a car engine apart, and by analyzing the parts, you can understand how the engine works. I use the counter-analogy now to say that with modern car engines that are actually based upon electricity, you cannot do that anymore. You cannot take a car engine apart in the same way, an electrical engine, that you can with a mechanical engine. And this is the same with reality, because reality has one thing that modern science is in denial of: consciousness. Every single person in this room is a sentient something that's perceiving something. And we know from quantum mechanics that effectively the interface between consciousness and the creation of physical bits of matter, the collapse of the wave function, has been telling us since 1924 that there's a relationship between consciousness and physical reality. So when we're talking about flying saucers, when we're talking about UFOs and everything else as well, science has to wake up to realize you don't have all the answers. You're like the medieval schoolmen creating epicycles to understand the retrograde motion of the outer planets. We know that they could explain it, but they explained it in the most tortuous and difficult way. The same is with what we tend to call the phenomenon. The phenomenon is something that is experienced by people, and by the phenomenon I mean everything from near-death experiences to out-of-body experiences to lucid dreaming. All these things are experienced by people. And science needs to realize that if we have to have a full understanding, we have to stop this silo thinking. It's like a huge Venn diagram, and the answer to the future of humanity is in the overlapping areas. And we need to move out from the silo and start, as myself and these guys were saying just before we came on, we need to be taking them on. We need to be using their science where they can't just turn around and dismiss us. It's powerfully important, and these are exciting times. And the work these guys are doing is extraordinary. I only heard fully about it earlier on today. It is incredible. This is paradigm-changing stuff, and I'm just honored to be vaguely involved in breathing the same air as these guys.
Fantastic, Anthony. Give him a hand, too. Now, Caroline is a person that has shown many times and has proven many times her work and her science. It's like the person who said, hey, do the math and show us how it's done. Caroline, Cory, tell us about what you've been up to, and tell us about how you feel about the question I gave.
Yeah, I think there are two issues here. One is that the phenomenon itself is not linear. There's multiple things going on. For example, the first experience I had coming in contact with beings, I've done that my whole life, but even at the age of 5, you don't have time to study or go on the internet. It just happens, right? And so you think, okay, wait a minute, were these beings, like, did they just show up in a flying saucer? Like, how does that work? So this is a contact experience with non-human entities, and and science doesn't want to go there, because as soon as you say dimensions, interdimensional, as soon as you say consciousness, that's like the C word. It was hilarious, like when I was filming A Tear in the Sky, I had, of course, scientists, mainstream scientists on the team. And then I had Travis Taylor, do you guys know who he is? Also as a guest scientist, and we were all like butting heads. The mainstream scientists were like, when we're doing UFOs, we're not talking about consciousness, we're not talking about, and then Travis is like, well, you are a conscious being, aren't you? There's something called consciousness. And I was like, guys, help, it's like, so science is just, is struggling, demonstrating non-physical things using physical laws. You see, that's the problem. And so, but then there's the other side of the UFO phenomenon, when we see actual objects, doing crazy things, and then we have technology that the government, it's actually our technology, the government doesn't want to talk about it because of, security, whatever, oh my God, we're all going to die. And so, then you have that issue with government conspiracies and things like that. And then you have these biological things that show up, that morph into different forms. We caught a bunch of things. You saw that, Clyde, in my movie, A Tear in the Sky. They would just show up, they would zigzag, and then literally disappear. Or they would show up out of nowhere. I mean, the camera is just, and multiple cameras from different angles triangulating, these things showing up, rotating, and just disappearing. So, it's not one thing. So science has a hard time wrapping their heads around how to explain this thing. So that's the reason why when we all have different experiences, it's really up to us. And the second issue is, what is reality? I mean, for example, what I believe in, that I believe there are UFOs, there are beings out there interacting with us. Maybe my neighbor doesn't. In fact, I'll just tell you a little quick story. One time I was in my house and I just felt something, outside. So it was nighttime. So I go outside and sure enough, I see these lights right above my backyard. And it was 3 lights, and they were like bumping into each other like this. And I looked up and I thought, wait, is that, I started kind of, my natural instinct is to communicate. Is that what I think it is? And all of a sudden, the 3 lights turned into 4, then it split into 6. I was like, yes, And then I said, well, if you can communicate, if you are what I think you are, then show me more. And I started walking outside my house, about half a mile in one direction. And these lights were like following me. It was hilarious. And so there's this neighbor who's walking her dog. And so I was like, oh, perfect. Now I have it. I'm not crazy. There's someone else here. And I tell her, and I said, hey, excuse me, do you see these lights? Aren't they weird? And she looks up. She's like, oh, yeah. That's very strange. But she said, oh, but these are probably just searchlights. And then she goes about walking her dog. And like nothing happens. So in her reality, you see what I'm saying? In her reality, nothing happened. This thing doesn't exist. It's not an issue. You know what I mean? And for me, it was like, holy shit, So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, so when we're trying to find one answer to this very convoluted, multidimensional problem, it's science, it's like, I give up, So that's why we just have to try to get whatever we can, out of science. And that's what I did in A Tear in the Sky. We had multiple thousands of dollars worth of equipment across the spectrum of physics, from optical to magnetometers to spectrum analyzers to, triangulating, getting data. So we did get thousands of hours of data, and that's the best we can do, to bring that science. But at the end of the day, it's really up to us.
Adam.
Well said. I believe that we tend to underestimate the challenges that scientists face in doing any kind of meaningful research on things like UFOs and consciousness. One of the reasons for that is that if you want to be successful as a scientist, you need to narrow your focus. It's not enough just to be a scientist, you have to be a physicist. It's not enough just to be a physicist, you have to be a particle physicist. It's not enough just to be a particle physicist, you have to be deeply focused on one niche area and spend 20 years doing it. For better or worse, that's the situation we've created. It's not all bad, of course. We need deep-level domain expertise, but at a structural level, it falls apart when you're encountering phenomena like UFOs, which seem to cross many boundaries. They are physical craft, but they are also interdimensional craft. They seem to have an alternative energy source and manipulate gravity and maybe even space-time, and to say nothing of the consciousness dimension. And as a trained scientist who's done everything right and narrowed their focus, how do you even begin to say anything meaningful about the subject in the way that you're used to? So these are big challenges. It's not clear to me how to proceed. Some people say that science advances one funeral at a time. I'm a little more optimistic than that. And I think what Carolyn mentioned is, it's a very, you have gaps that are being filled by citizen scientists who are acting as generalists. And you have a communication infrastructure that we didn't have in previous centuries. And we might see a greater involvement of the general population in creating a new framework for understanding these anomalies that is going to be unexpected and that's going to accelerate our progress. And that gives me hope.
Mark?
When it comes to science and trying to understand this type of phenomena, one of the problems that we all face is trying to explain it in terms of the rules we think we understand about the universe. But we don't know the rules of the universe entirely. For instance, we know, as in physics, we know that there's 4 fundamental forces. And we have the weak force, the strong force, light, and gravity. We can explain the other forces other than gravity with equations that describe wave nature and particle nature, photons and waves of light, right? We can't do that with gravity. See, we can't penetrate the veil of gravity. We can see gravitational waves through the magic of colliding black holes, okay? But we haven't seen the graviton yet, that particle of gravity that's rumored to exist. Now, CERN is looking for that particle right now. They have a detector called ATLAS at the Large Hadron Collider, and they're going to be looking for this magic graviton. And this graviton's actually, they're looking for a Kaluza-Klein graviton. And they're doing it because the particle is very interesting. And it might be the gateway to interstellar flight. But no one really knows that yet. We don't know what's out there because we're asking the wrong questions and using the wrong instruments. We haven't invented the science yet, or explored it, or discovered the science yet that's going to allow us to penetrate that veil. So inexorably slow, we move forward. And sooner or later, we'll get there, but we're not there yet. And so I think that trying to explain this phenomena that's occurring, that we know is occurring, that we see is occurring, that we've experienced, is going to be done within the rules we understand at the moment. And the rules are woefully inadequate, and we all know that. And that's what keeps us going.
Good job. Okay, now here's a curveball. Ready? Okay. Is the UFO phenomena a matter of faith, matter of science, or is it a military matter?
I would argue that it's complicated, it's Fordian, or very analog. I think for some people it is a matter of faith, for them personally. It is absolutely a matter of science as well. It's part of our physical universe. I personally don't believe in the paranormal. I believe it's all physics. I believe that the physics that are involved are so beyond us right now that it appears paranormal. It appears like magic. And in terms of a military problem, there's a lot of indication that we were overflown and intimidated in July 1947, March 1950, July 1952. So it is absolutely a security matter. Our most sensitive installations were overflown repeatedly at will. And there's a massive signal of that. I mean, it's huge. You cannot miss it. I've been through these archives, these newspaper archives. They're incredible. I was blown away. I've posted some of these clippings on Twitter to tens of thousands of people, and people said I was making some of them up. So I would always give them the original URLs, and then they would shut up because they'd be able to click on it themselves. There's just something new that's happened this century, is that now people can access all the newspaper archives since for the last approximately 150 years easily by clicking a button, and then boom, it pops up. So they were able to censor the news wires, but they weren't able to reliably censor the local newspapers. And so we're now able to see the huge Washington, D.C. overflight. So just to answer your question, it's absolutely a military matter too. But however, if whatever this force is or forces wanted to destroy us, it would have already happened.
Okay. Mitch, do you want to comment, or do you want to move on to Anthony? This question.
As we were just saying in the last question about that elephant's got all these pieces that each person is going to touch, and it's got so many facets to it. How do you describe it? And all I can say to answer your question now is I'm just going to look at the physical part, because it really bothers me right now that science can't say that UFOs exist. Why can't they say that? It's because data is being hidden from us.
It's classified.
I just want to get that data, because I want to at least get that part. So I want to say this part of the elephant exists, and that's a done deal. So as far as figuring out the whole thing, I don't know.
What do you think is going to happen on the 20th of October when they say, we demand this? I mean, you've heard about that, right? That on the 20th of October, they want all of the information because the NDAA has said, this is part of our NDAA problem. We need to make sure that you guys get out everything you've ever had, from crashes to any kind of data or whatever. They want it all on October 20th. Do you think that's going to happen, or do you think it's just all?
They'll contain it.
They'll what? They'll contain it?
They'll use containment. They'll contain it, yeah.
Yeah.
As a crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, I can tell you that I don't believe anything the government does, and I don't believe the government's going to give us what we want.
Right.
They've destroyed their credibility.
Which goes back to the idea. I mean, we waited, 75 years for the government to tell us the truth, and everybody's waiting for the government or the military to give us the truth. Why? I don't know why.
They made it so secret, they don't even know the truth anymore.
Well,
actually,
yeah,
I would argue
say,
we know more about
right.
the situation than they do in a whole.
That's why the question was asked, because I'm thinking, well, it's a military issue if it's a national security issue. It's a religious issue if the Pope says it is, and if it's something else, I mean, what do we do with that? Anthony, what do you do with it?
I think your original question was a superb one. The idea is it a belief system? Is it a scientific issue, or it is a military issue? And I'm reminded of the famous statement, which I think it was either by Arthur C. Clarke or it could have been by Isaac Asimov. The idea of the science of any future technology will be effectively, as far as we're concerned, as damn near magic as possible. Now, in which case, it still comes down to me, and it always will come down to probably physics. So in which case, although it will seem like magic, it's not really. And I think we have to be breaking the phenomenon down. But then we have the wonderful situation, and some of you will know about my concept of the egregorial, the idea that we collapse the wave function of our particular anticipations in one way or another, applying the Copenhagen interpretation. And in which case it means that maybe the data we receive and the information we receive is in effect being anticipated and created by our collective wanting it to be. I'll do a very quick analogy here, because I was always fascinated by this. Many years ago, when they were looking for the muon, which is one of the subatomic particles, E.E. Raby, who was the Nobel Prize winner who was involved in it, when they finally discovered the muon, his exclamation was, "Who ordered that?" Which means effectively there seems to be, like the discovery of the Higgs boson, or the graviton, which that they're desperately trying to find as the boson of the gravitational field. It seems that there seems to be a relationship between what we see in the skies and what we anticipate there being in the skies. You know, as Carl Jung said, you know, the myth of things seen in the sky. So I think, so that brings it down to the religious aspect. So we have the scientific aspect, we have the religious aspect, and of course, inevitably, in any advanced society, or indeed in any advanced society throughout history, the military are bound to be involved because it will be seen as an unknown and therefore a threat. And individuals who start questioning that will also become a threat because they want to contain it. They don't want us to know because they don't want mass panic. And as a sociologist, I can understand why they don't want to do that. We don't want another repeat of the Orson Welles incident with the Mars attack thing, the War of the Worlds. So it needs to be contained generally because people will then interpret in their own way the implications of what this means. And we all have carry our own belief systems around, and we will interpret that information based upon those belief systems. That is their fear. And to a certain extent, I can understand that fear. But effectively, for knowledge and for humanity moving forward, there has to be an acceptance that we do have this phenomenon. And these guys doing the data, that data can then be taken. It's tangible. Well, it's not technically not tangible, but it's quantifiable. It's something you can take and say, argue with that one, mate. You know, you can turn around to the cows come home with you know, I experienced this and I experienced that. They want concrete data, and these guys are doing it, and that's so important.
Caroline? Yeah.
I assume, Clyde, you mean the disclosure, right? Is the
Well, yeah.
disclosure...
Is it a matter of the disclosure? Is it a matter of who's got the responsibility here? Is it faith-based? It should be a matter of faith. Should be a matter of science. Should be a matter of the military.
Right. I think that's the problem. It's all of the above. And if the government were to disclose something, first of all, nobody would... Hello? Okay. So...
Shut you off.
Is anybody from the government here? But seriously, like, I mean, the government is the one that has been lying to us, right? I mean, and telling us that we're all crazy, it doesn't exist, and what are you talking about? And national security, we're not going to tell you, classified this, classified that. And so when they come out now and say, hey, you were right all along, and there's a, I mean, are we gonna just like believe the people who've been lying to us all along? So there's that issue.
What about the facet that, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to. What about the facet of the idea that there's a lot of religion right now that's turning on aliens?
Exactly.
You felt that too, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, even the Vatican was saying aliens exist and things like that. But so what happens, because it's all interconnected. So if the government says something, then the other kind of, the scientific community is going to say, wait, but that hasn't been proven. We think it's this, we think it's that. We're not sure, it's non-physical, we don't know interdimensional. And so it's almost like every part of society basically is like we need a holistic disclosure for this to work. And the same thing with religion and faith. So, or the belief system, like I was saying earlier about the story I just told you. I mean, it's been proven many times over that, for example, in the past, people did not see the boats coming to America because they didn't believe a boat existed. Does that make sense? And so the actual experience of a reality and manifestation depends on your belief. So here we are, 8 billion people, or however, on this planet, all with our own perspective of what should happen for disclosure to come about, and like one doesn't work without the other. Does that make sense? Even if the government says something, science is going to say no. If science says something, then the religious people are going to say no. So that's the problem we have on this planet. In fact, not just about UFOs, I think across the board. You know, and that's why we're at war. That's why we're in competition. That's why everything is about, competing with each other and doing all that stuff, because we don't understand that we're all entangled. And whatever I do over here is going to affect me over there. And so I think that's the problem of this. Until we fix the fundamental issue that we are not separate, that we are one consciousness, then I really believe the UFO phenomenon or any other problem on this planet will not be totally resolved.
Normally I would say science, but for the sake of conversation, I'll attempt to defend the faith position. Well, I think we can all agree that the government aspect has a bit of a credibility problem, which is an obstacle. But there's this question of what motivates a scientist. Why even look into these things at all? Science it's not exactly correct to say that science gives you truth. What it does is it gives you facts. And facts are things to which a human must apply meaning and context and importance for it to be relevant. And that has traditionally been the role of our spiritual advisors on the faith side, whether they're from a church or from your yoga teacher. I think there's an intuition that all of these anomalies matter because they're saying something about truth, not about facts. The facts are things that we want to be sure of so that we can come to our own deeper and more meaningful understanding about the nature of reality and who and what we are. And perhaps it will be led more in the faith dimension than strictly in the research dimension.
That's well said. You know, if you think about the whole disclosure aspect, the military has a piece of it, science has a piece of it, faith has a piece of it, consciousness has a piece of it. Why? Well, because many of you know that I was on a submarine decades ago and they saw something move through the sonar at hundreds of miles an hour underwater. Nothing does that, okay? So now the military has a piece of it. And they say, okay, what is this phenomenon? And their mission right now to this day is observe and report, because they can't do anything about it. They're not aggressive. They're just there. So they just say, just see what they do. I don't know what to do with them, but whatever they're doing, just let us know. That's as far as we got with it. So that's the military side. They don't really know underwater what's going on. At least they're not saying. Science, on the other hand, is attempting to figure out how they can do that, how they can move so fast underwater. I think if you heard my lecture yesterday, we have a good idea that maybe they're using dimensional shifting, an oscillating dimensional shifting methodology, that it turns out that, I mentioned before, CERN and the Large Hadron Collider Atlas detector in particular is looking for evidence of in this particular case. So as far as, see, the government's here again. Yeah, thank you, NSA. But as it turns out, as far as, let's say, religion goes, it was only a few years ago when the Pope made the announcement to the Catholic world that if aliens were discovered to be real, that it wouldn't upset religious dogma. And there's a reason he said that, and he said that because it looked like disclosure was going to happen at that point. And so they ended up trying to get out in front of it, because they were going to get a lot of questions, as you can imagine. Why don't they look like us? Do they have gods? Who are they? Are they God? You know, yeah, your God is a gray alien with big round eyes. I mean, who knew? Right, so that could be, you know, a question that would have to be answered. So obviously they were trying to get in front of it. So everyone has a piece of it, but no one has the answers because no one can penetrate fully into the veil of the phenomenon in a way that is meaningful to give us the right data to make the proper assumptions. As you said, we acquire data, humans have to assign importance to it, and sometimes that importance is misplaced. And so far, it's been misplaced, but we're actually, I think we're on the right track though, Clyde, I really do.
Fantastic. Let's give the panel a big hand. Okay,